feature brought to you by YaYa. We are a community that connects and empowers women with the coaching and supports they need to thrive both personally and professionally. This series is very personal to me. Probably, in fact, inspired by Kyla, because I text and call Kyla anytime I need mom advice. And I thought, hey, other people should probably listen in as well, because they probably also have a million questions. So Kyla, thank you for being the inspiration for Mom to Mom. We are so lucky to be talking to you. You are an entrepreneur, you are a mom, you are a speech language pathologist. And last year you launched an app to help families and educators with early language development. So welcome. And by the way, 5 months ago, she became a mom. So congrats.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. And I just have to say, before we get into things, that I've been watching your interviews with other moms, and you have this bottomless pit of just amazingly high achieving mom friends. And it's so amazing to see. So you have such an amazing community around you as you get ready for your own baby.
Well, as one of the women who trained me and organized my baby shower, it starts with you. So thank you. First, just to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about SpeakEasy and the app as well?
Yeah, so my background is as a speech pathologist, and I was working for a few years in kind of a hospital clinic setting where I was seeing patients, face-to-face, and then sending them off on their way each week. And a thing that I noticed all the time was parents were having trouble with that carryover from my speech room to their home environment, or they were waiting forever for therapy on these huge wait lists. And so it was always an issue that that I talked about at home with my husband, Ken. And at some point we decided, why don't we do something about it? So we created SpeakEasy Community as a way to reach out to parents and give them more information that they can use at home. And we launched our app, which is called SpeakEasy Home Speech Therapy, last July. We had started working on it about a year before that, and just playing around with different iterations. And what we ended up with is a language journey that we take parents through, where they can, from their home environment, use materials that they have at home and work little language activities into their day based on the level that their child is at. We're mostly focused on birth to 5, those early language years. And they work through the activities, and they can read learning labs, which is another section of the app where they can learn about evidence-based information related to speech and language development. And we've started reaching out to more professionals also. And so we have other SLPs and development-related professionals who are using the app to better serve the families that they're working with when they're not face-to-face with them. So we're going in lots of directions with that, but that's kind of the basics.
Well, first of all, entrepreneurs have the mindset that problem equals opportunity. And I love that you come at this from a perspective of access. How can more people access this? And how can it be more affordable? How can you do it in your home just from your phone? So super cool. I also know, as a mom to be, how anxious this whole thing can be about, gosh, milestones, and is my baby on track? I don't even have a baby yet, and I'm worried about, is this baby on track? So I just love what you're doing. Just before we move on, what is your website, in case anybody watching wants to go check it out?
Yeah, SpeakEasyCommunity.com, and you can sign up for the app from there.
Great. I'm just going to put that down, SpeakEasyCommunity.com. And of course, your app is in all the stores. Great. Well, I requested a bio from you, Kyla, because you're my friend, but I don't always know all the professional accomplishments of the women in my life. And I saw that you had 3 specialty areas in your training: early intervention, feeding, and bilingual language development. Can you just tell us a little bit about each of those and how they are integrated into SpeakEasy, or kind of future offerings, maybe? I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been someone who wants to keep learning, and so even after grad school and starting practicing as a speech therapist, I was always kind of looking for, where I could go. Going to conferences was my favorite thing when I worked at the hospital. And so I started specializing in a number of different areas. So the early intervention is what the app is focused on. And it's that, birth to 5, but birth to 3 really is the main focus. Critical language development period, where kids who are not getting services, or even kids who are typically developing but aren't getting in as much stimulation as they could be during that time, are getting a huge disservice, because it's this huge developmental period where I think we learned that my baby's brain is growing at 1% per day right now, at 5 months old. So they have this huge just developmental period in the first few years where you have a huge opportunity to to help give them a boost. So that's kind of the early intervention piece. And that's what the whole app is focused on right now. The bilingual specialty is my program, my grad program was focused on bilingual and multicultural, working with bilingual and multicultural children and families. And I also speak Spanish. And so a big piece of that was speaking in Spanish with the families and the kids that I was working with, but also not just knowing about their language, but knowing about the cultural differences that might influence how parents and children are interacting with each other, what kinds of words they might be using, what they're talking about, what the expectations are, between parents and their kids, and how that influences speech and language development. And so that, while not directly related to the app right now, it's always in my mind when I'm thinking about activities to recommend to parents. And we, of course, would love to have a Spanish version of the app. It's something that we're working on as soon as we can, get to it with our team of 2 right now. So.
I'm curious, related to all this, I mean, how has your education and training affected your own parenting philosophy? Like, are you more intense about these milestones or slightly less intense?
Oh, gosh. While I love milestones as a guideline, my clinical standpoint is to focus on them a little bit less. And that's kind of tricky, because every parent who's looking for developmental information is looking for milestones, because that's what they know to look for, right? And that's what we kind of all get inundated with. And is my child behind? And so we actually chose to focus the app, or to move the app away from milestones. So we don't talk a lot about milestones in the app. We talk about 4 language levels. So we have pre-verbal, that before first words time, usually roughly in the first year. For a typically developing child. And then we have first words, word combiner, and full sentences. And that was in an effort to move a little bit more away from milestones and just give parents some tools to meet their children where they're at, and and really celebrate all the little gains that they're making, and go from there. I mean, that being said, we have to know a little bit about milestones, because it's important to know, if your child is roughly on track. So as a parent, I guess I would say I'm thinking about them, but I'm not overly obsessing about them, which maybe is something I'm able to do because I've spent so much time actually learning the milestones in school. I don't have to think about them as much now.
Well, I'm curious, how would you describe your parenting philosophy in general? I'm sure there's many ranges. One I think of is like free range, like go kids, like learn on your own, versus like very structured, and we're going to do this many activities. Again, we have a 5-month-old. It's not like you're putting her in summer camp, but how would you describe your parenting philosophy?
Oh gosh. I love interacting, and I think interaction is the basis for language development. So from a clinical standpoint and from a parent standpoint, getting that back and forth interaction in any way I can is kind of what I strive for every day. And so I try to follow her lead as much as possible. And sometimes that means taking a step back from what I want to do or what I think is the best thing to do, and kind of, looking at what she's looking at and making a comment about that, or, even on, away from language development, on feeding. I also have a specialty in feeding, and as a speech therapist, worked with lots of kids who had delays and difficulties with feeding too. And so I know a lot about the early introduction of solids and best practices in that. And I've always thought, I would never start solids until 6 months, because that's what's best for, best practice for babies based on the research. And then at, almost 5 months, a couple weeks ago, my baby decided that she was really, really ready for food. And she started looking at our food and reaching out for it. And then one day, Ken was making a smoothie, which he does every morning. And he showed it to her, and kind of, she kind of leaned over and she went, and then he took it away and she started crying. And I said, okay, I'm going to follow your lead. You're ready to try some food. So I try as much as possible to check in with her and see, what she's interested in and where she's ready to go.
I love that. Okay. So 2 best practices I heard: interactions, and of course, letting your child lead. Don't just run the summer camp, follow their lead. If you were to write a book, which I hope you will one day, any other Cliff Notes takeaways on kind of best practices with early language development?
Yeah, I mean, those are huge ones for sure. And particularly that interaction piece. I think we get really obsessed from a language standpoint with first words, and is my child saying a word, or even not thinking about language so much until they're ready to say words. And there's so much communication that's happening before words, and that is built on those back and forth interactions, starting from when, your 6-week-old is crying and you respond to them and say, I see that you feel sad about that, and just starting to have that back and forth. And maybe they make a sound and you make a sound back to them. And that back and forth creates that, that bond and that interaction that a conversation is built on. And so there's so much you can do even in those first few months, to develop that and get ready for words. So that's a big one for sure. And then I guess I would say just, be flexible. be flexible. It's so important. It's partly that, following their lead. And, I'm a natural rule follower, and I like routines, and, I like to know what's coming next, and having a baby is a great check on that. And so it's great as a parent to to set the routines and the schedule so that you can break them. And I'm still working on that sometimes with her and with myself. Now, but I think that's best practice. Yeah.
Some of that language practice you mentioned sounded to me almost like narration, because you can comment on what the baby's doing, on what the baby's looking at. So it sounds like you're encouraging me to be a crazy person and just talk to myself all day. But eventually, that is good practices, right? That's research driven.
Absolutely. Narration is best practice for sure. And I think you're going to be great at that. But, for some parents, it doesn't come that naturally. And, it's hard to balance your own personal style with, what's best practice in the research, or your cultural style. I mean, influences for how we interact with our kids come from so many different places. So yes, narration is one of the things that you can do. You can, Ken likes to sing because he's more comfortable with singing about what he's doing than I hope he doesn't mind I'm sharing that with the world here. But I thought that was a great way that he started interacting He didn't feel comfortable talking about every, move that he was making and everything he was doing, but singing it and just singing, I'm putting on your diaper and I'm wiping you, you can just have fun with it. And that's how they learn, which is kind of amazing.
A lot of people, I probably myself included, default to this baby voice, like, oh, hi, 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 hi. Is that not like, is research said that it's actually bad? Should we talk to babies like they're adults? Should we use, fancy words? Like, what's your recommendations on how to speak to a baby?
Yeah, two parts to that. The first one is, yes, it is actually a good thing to do all of the kind of varying your tone of your voice and, the hi baby, how are you? They learn, they're kind of like little scientists, and they're learning about the separation between your words by listening to where your voice is going and then the pauses between your words. So it actually has been shown that talking like that to babies is a natural biological instinct because it helps them to figure out the words and to kind of break down your sentences. The difference between, we would call that parentese in speech world, that natural way that parents kind of talk to their babies. I differentiate that from baby talk, which would be like calling their water YaYa, or calling their bottle Bubba. They are going to say those words as they're learning because that's naturally part of their speech development. But I discourage parents from saying them back. And instead, I would tell parents to say, oh, yeah, that's your water, just respond back to them and use the word again. So parentese good, baby words, baby talk, not so good.
No, very clear takeaway. I love it. I'm literally taking notes. Are there other common mistakes that parents make? And not like, again, you've messed up, you failed, but just traps that parents fall into, like baby talk, that might not be super helpful.
Oh, baby talk is a big one. Let's see. I think maybe parents tend to over engage sometimes. Silence can be good. One of our strategies in the app, the first 4 that we have are, and I can actually talk about the rest of them too, are face-to-face, exaggerate, pause, and narrate, which you talked about. And so that pause is all about checking in and seeing what your child is looking at or what they're doing with their body that might be communicating to you. And so if you're over here, talking all about your fun game with the ball, and what they really want is this bear that they're staring at, over there, they're not going to be learning as much from you because they're not looking at you. They're not focusing on the same object that you are. So that pause and wait is a really big strategy for a lot of parents. And a lot of parents that I talk to say that that's been the most helpful one for them in the app to learn about, just that pause and check in. It can be pause and check in on what I'm doing. It can be pause and observe. For me as a speech therapist, I also tend to do the talk. Like I always have to be giving something to this child. But one of the biggest things that I learned in my first couple of years practicing was that pause and observe is super important. It's important, for parents too, to kind of check in.
I love that. Now, Kyla, I've seen you use some sign language. I'm just curious, how does that complement early language development? I don't know much about it. I haven't read anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, signs, baby signs, which are just are simple signs that are taken from American Sign Language. So usually they're one sign, not a whole sentence. It might be, milk for milk. Or I use that one a lot. We use, open. We talk about books. There's simple signs. And the idea is that kids can both understand and use their hands and gestures and signs earlier, then they can program all of those motor movements that it takes to make speech sounds. It's actually really complicated to, figure out how to make a sound, coordinating, turning on your vocal cords, vibrating them, and moving your tongue in the right way, and moving your lips in just the right amount. And so babies do really well with looking at visuals too. So the signs and more broadly gestures, I encourage baby signs specifically, but also just gestures more broadly, as long as you're doing the same thing each time. So, maybe you make up your own gesture that's not a sign for sweeping. And every time you talk about sweeping, with your child, you go like this. They'll get to know that they'll associate that gesture with the word, and it will eventually help them learn the word. So it gives them a little bit of a boost, a little bit earlier than they can put together the words. So,
as you know, I'm pregnant. Other people watching might be pregnant. Are there best practices you should do during pregnancy? Because I remember once I put music on right outside my belly, and the baby just started kicking a lot. And I was like, either the baby loves this or the baby hates this and is like, what's going on out there? So and I don't even know how far the baby can hear. Is the baby benefiting from this conversation? Because I'm on Zoom meetings all day, and thus there's lots of words that the baby's hearing. I don't really understand what's happening in uterus. Are there best practices in utero for language development?
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to test my memory a little bit, but the last trimester, their hearing is fully developed. So
wow.
Especially in that last trimester, they're able to hear music. They're able to hear your voice, partner's voice if there's a partner around, and so they come out naturally recognizing already the parents' voices, or whoever's voices are around them all the time, and moms more than anything, or birth parents more than anything, because every moment of the day that you're talking, they're actually they're hearing those sounds and they're feeling the vibrations too. So talking to your baby in utero is great practice. Music is also good practice from what I've read. I think I read something recently, they used to tell people to put the headphones on your belly. And I actually read something while I was pregnant that maybe that was not good for their hearing development, because it could actually be too loud. So
it makes sense to me. You wouldn't bring a baby to a wedding, you'd have headphones, and that seems like really loud direct application.
Yeah. So just fixing my plug over here. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Making sure I can stay here. My computer's not going to go anywhere. There. Mm-hmm. But the talking, they definitely get used to your voice. And so I think the more the better in utero and from the beginning.
As a future mom, one pressing question. So I'm a former high school English teacher. I love literature. If I get tired of reading picture books, can I read the books that I want to read to the baby? I'm sure some books are great because they're more they're going to engage the baby more with touch or colors. But am I sometimes allowed to just read aloud the book I want to be reading, and that's still kind of good for the baby?
Absolutely. Especially really early on, they're learning from hearing your voice and from just hearing words. There's a bunch of research out there about the 30 million word gap. I don't know if you've heard about that, but basically the summary is they looked at children from disadvantaged families compared to middle class and then upper class families. And what they found is that there was a big gap in the number of words that the kids heard based on parent education level, more or less, and that correlated to economic level also. And the more words that they hear from the beginning, the better. And it can be as simple as that. Obviously, there are more strategies you can layer on from there, but the more words your baby hears, the better. So I'd say, hearing your voice and hearing all kinds of words is great practice from the beginning.
One thing I learned, I just became a dog mom, as you know, last year, and they, in early puppy development, they say you should socialize your puppy. Now, of course, I know that, when our children are older, I'll send them to childcare, they'll be with other kids. But at the beginning, what does socialization really mean? And if, we're still in a pandemic, how do you socialize children? I'll share an example where for the puppy, they said, wear a hat, put an umbrella on, like your puppy needs to be exposed to different looking. And Kyla, you know this, but actually you missed this, but my puppy started barking at someone who had a beard, because during the pandemic, he's never seen anybody with a beard because everyone's been masked. So I'm just curious, are there things like that you should do with a baby to socialize them, even if it's just talking in funny voices, different voices? I'm curious.
I have to say, I have never thought about the changing your appearance thing. It's kind of a fascinating avenue to explore. So I don't know about that specifically with babies, but I mean, babies are social creatures from so early on. And I remember the first time I really thought about that with my baby was, she was nursing, and starting around, 3.5 months, she would look up at me. She would stop nursing, get distracted, and look up at me. And she wanted that interaction, and then she'd kind of go back to nursing. And then, she wanted to have a little social chat while she was eating, and it can be annoying for moms when that starts to happen. But it's also this really cool milestone because you see them start to interact. I mean, I like to talk to someone while I'm eating too, that's so I think they're built for social interaction from early on. And while I don't have specific pandemic substitutes for that, I think it's great for them to see different people, video chat, see different faces as much as possible. And, the other thing about that is that every person that's interacting with a baby is going to bring something a little different to the table. And so it's really nice, as much as possible, to have those interactions with other people from early on. Like, I watch Ken play with our baby in different ways than I do. And he gets her giggling so much sometimes from the really active, jumping kind of play. And I'm more into words and sound play. And, so everyone has their style, and they're going to bring something else to help them learn.
Kyla, I'm sure some people are new to babies. And so if someone wanted to play with Evie, but really just had no idea how to interact with your child, like they're like, what is this? How do I don't know. What are easy ways to interact? If you're just like, here's 101, this is how you play with because, maybe some of my friends, they want to hang out with me. They don't want to hang out with my baby, and they don't even know how to interact with my baby.
Yeah. 101 is get face to face. Like, let them look at your face, make some faces, make some sounds. It doesn't matter what you say. They're just exploring and looking, and that face-to-face interaction is the basis of all interaction. They're going to observe so much from how you're moving your mouth and making sounds, and your expressions and emotions that as you talk to them. You could read the newspaper to them in, in a face of, sit your baby in front of you and read the newspaper, and they'd learn from that. Exaggerating helps too, right? Kind of getting in there, using that parentese that we were talking about before. And, I think the takeaway is the words themselves don't matter that much. It's the interaction, and just giving them the chance to observe you as a fully formed human and see what you're doing.
So you spent most of 2020 pregnant. You had your baby in November, end of November. Any other just recommendations that you would give to pregnant moms out there? Or I know that sounds like, that you have tons of advice. I'm actually just curious, things from your pregnancy that you thought were beneficial?
Yeah, my style is knowledge. So I've always been on the read everything side, So that was, for me, really helpful. I read a lot. even before I was pregnant, because child development and breastfeeding and, early development is all really exciting for me. That was easy for me to do. But, I loved just kind of reading the research and, informing my own opinions on things. I read a lot about nutrition in early pregnancy because that just became a topic that I was interested in. And then I was able to use that to kind of make some of my own decisions about what made sense to eat and not eat during pregnancy, for example. So I think that knowledge is really powerful, and then you can kind of decide what's best practice for you from there.
I love that. I wrote down forming my own opinions. I love that. Based on that, I'm just curious, do you have any unconventional or just less traditional opinions on pregnancy or motherhood that would be fun to share?
I think pregnancy is and labor and delivery becomes this kind of like emergency situation in a lot of places. And I very much wanted it to not be that, and was pretty successful at that based on reading a lot and deciding what my path was through labor and delivery. In some other countries, midwives are the main caretakers of pregnant women. We have this thing in the US where, everything gets really medicalized, and OBs, as well-meaning as they are meant to be surgical specialists. In a lot of places, the midwives take care of the normal, as long as everything's going well through pregnancy and labor and delivery. It's a midwife that's attending and making sure everything progresses and advising. And the OBs only step in if there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And our practice in the US is so the opposite of that everything becomes really medicalized. We have these surgical specialists who are in there from the beginning. And then, more interventions happen than need to sometimes. So that was a big thing for me, getting prepared for birth, reading a lot about, for me, that was about an unmedicated labor and delivery for me, and using other strategies, and and that worked for me.
I have a friend who's a doula, and her catchphrase is "Pregnancy is not a medical crisis."
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to brag my system where my husband's in residency, UCSF. The practice is actually primarily run by midwives, and the OB is only on hand for complications. So I think that is a great model. I personally want to share, I am not great with pain. I'm just curious, what pain management, particularly breathing exercises, did you practice beforehand? What did you find helpful to prepare for pain management during labor?
Yeah, I did a version of hypnobirth, if you've read at all about hypnobirthing, where you basically are supposed to get into this kind of meditative state by listening to tracks over and over again and preparing, in the months leading up to birth. And I ended up using it some during early labor. By the time I was, actually in the birth center, in active labor, I wasn't thinking about using any strategies. I think, I already had gotten into this place where it was just, I was in my body. And I think that using that, the hypnobirth techniques ahead of time helped me get to there. And then for me, because everything was unmedicated, I was able to feel what was going on. I was able to move around. And I was able to kind of just go with all of those natural biological tendencies of my body. And that worked for me.
I wanted to go back. You did say you read a lot. Just for viewers listening, I'm just curious if you want to share some of the texts or resources that were the most helpful. Because some people are like you, are knowledge seekers. They're like, tell me what to read or to listen to. So any plugs for your favorites?
Yeah. I love Lily Nichols is a dietitian who I read her. I'm going to blank on the name of the title, but it's her book about pregnancy nutrition. And then she also has one that's focused on gestational diabetes, which I did end up having, and I ended up reading her information about that too. That was super helpful for me. And I love Emily Oster's book, Expecting Better, which just presents all of the research in a very easy to digest way and lets birthing parents make their decisions from there, which I think is so powerful.
Well, I love it. It's just what you said too. Like, you are a knowledge seeker and you use knowledge to be able to form your own opinions and not just be like afraid of irrational things. So I love that. Kyla, there's the idea of motherhood. I had a mom, so like I can picture motherhood. But then there's the reality. You have spent probably 2 decades studying a lot of these things. I'm just curious, have there been any surprises in the past 5 months where the reality of motherhood was different than what you'd expected?
Yeah, the very specific one that came to mind first is infants are so noisy. With all of the early language and early feeding prep that I had going in, my baby was the gruntiest baby, and she would make these sounds all night long. And every time she made a sound, I would think, oh my God, she's choking, she's dying, something terrible is happening. As it turns out, many babies are just really grunty. And I don't know why no parents are talking about this. So it's become my mission to tell all future parents about the possibility of their baby making lots of strange noises in the first couple of months and being totally normal.
Is it part of their trying to experiment how they use their mouth? And like, what is it?
I think in her case, it was digestion. They have they just have terrible, immature digestive systems early on. And just I don't know, maybe they're experimenting with some sounds too from early on. I'm not sure about the research on that, but I think she was just kind of, making noises as she was feeling things in her body. And, it happened all night long because, night is day and day is night for the first couple months, and they don't really know the difference.
Do you feel like you've changed or grown at all in just the past 5 months? Because again, you've been studying this forever. You already were an early childhood expert, and educator and therapist, speech language pathologist. So I'm just curious, how have you changed as a mom, or how have you grown? We'll say it, evolved.
I'm not. Let me think about it for a second. What I have just loved seeing is day to day that development that I have studied for years actually happening, and it happens at a rate of day to day with an infant. I mean, it's really incredible. Yesterday, Evie decided that she was going to start making "b" sounds. So she's been starting to experiment with sounds a little bit. And at the beginning of the day, she had been a few days previously kind of listening to sounds a little bit more. And she liked to put her hand on my mouth and feel what I was doing when I was talking to her. And yesterday at the beginning of the day, she started, kind of moving her lips around and and then she'd go, ah. And she couldn't quite coordinate all the pieces of it. And by the end of the day, she had made a "b" sound. She had figured it out. She just tried all day long. And she made a sound. And so you kind of just see that development happening before your eyes. And I have just been making sure that I really take the time to observe and see how she is at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, because inevitably she's going to have a new skill. So it's made me a good observer for sure.
On one hand, when you say things like the baby's brain grows 1% every day, that's both magical and inspiring, also terrifying. Like, that's a lot of pressure on me. Am I supposed to be doing some part of that? And it sounds like for the most part, you're just like, be present and interact with your baby. Also say, there's parts of me that's like, feels like when the baby is nursing, for example, I'm like, God, thank you. I can be on my phone for a moment. I feel like, am I supposed to be present all the time? Like, how do you kind of juggle it all?
I mean, it's a work in progress, right? Figuring out that balance. But no, you're totally right. I mean, being present is really important, and spending some of that time dedicated to just being present in whatever that means for you is great. And also, taking care of your own health is really important too. And so if that means taking 5 minutes to look at your phone, or if that means, you know, figuring out what childcare is for half an hour so that you can exercise, those things are super important too as a parent. If you're not feeling healthy and with it, then you're not going to be able to help your baby grow. So
one of my friends who's a dad said, write down the 30 things you'd love to do in your free time, cross them all off, and then actually, maybe you'll be able to do 3 of them. And so I'm curious, what did you do for sanity in, let's say, like the first 2 weeks? What were some of your strategies that you do for yourself?
Yeah, I had a mantra of eat, shower, sleep. Was it eat? That doesn't sound right now. I had walk. 3 things. It was walk. It was walk.
Because I love going on walks with you.
Yes. And at any given day, I would make my goal to do 2 of them. And I recognized that for the first few weeks, it was not going to be possible to do all 3. But, maybe I would take a nap and go on a walk, and not take a shower, and no big deal because nobody else saw me anyway, for example. And then I got to a point where I had a day where I did all 3, and I was, and that's when I realized, like, we're progressing, right?
I'm glad eat then wasn't one of the 3, because I hope you eat every day.
No. I ate a lot. I don't know why I said that first. I was definitely eating plenty. I also had a lot of support early on. I had scheduled things so that my mom was here for the first couple of weeks. And I have an amazing partner, and, he was super supportive, especially in those first weeks when, my body was not feeling at 100%. And helping, working with the team, right, to make sure baby's cared for and parents are also caring for themselves, was really helpful. Also, specifically, getting outdoors, now, even, at 5 months, is a great goal for almost every day. We live in Oakland, so we're super lucky that sometimes that just means getting out to the deck and, and playing for a little bit. Sometimes that means going on a walk with a friend. But I think Evie is happier when we have an outside day too. And so everyone just feels kind of refreshed and happier. It's been really nice.
I love it. I'm curious, one of the biggest questions, of course, is how is motherhood, which could be many people, they just like lose themselves and becomes their primary identity. We have many identities, right? Like, you are a founder, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a sister, you're a friend. How has motherhood impacted these other areas of your life? And I don't mean that too in a deficit-based way. It's not like motherhood has taken over in negative ways. In some ways, I'm sure it's actually made you better in other aspects of your life. So just tell me some of the things it's impacted.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's seamless in a lot of ways because our business is baby focused. Yeah. And so we have been able to, and I mean, it's a work in progress. We're figuring out what balance of home, working from home and having baby at home and balancing, all of the, it all kind of blends together when it's all in the same space. But it's been really nice to have a baby developing as an example so that I can, as I'm thinking about work and activities and new inspiration to write things for parents, I have this, baby inspiration at home that I can use. She's actually become our little SpeakEasy mascot, and we started trying out the activities that we have in the app with her, and so it's a great check-in for me to make sure that they work and they're good ideas, and also just really fun, to have different ways to interact with her and play with her. So I think business and motherhood go together because I have a business that's related to parents, and so that's been really nice in a lot of ways. The balancing everything is tricky. I've decided that my big priority now is being a mom, and I'm spending a lot of time with her. And Ken has decided that he wants to do some of that too. And so we are super, super privileged to be able to pick our own hours and develop our business at the pace that we want to. And so for these first few months, that's looked like, I've been working very part-time and taking care of baby, and Ken's been really enjoying coming out in the middle of the day and having a play break with her, and and that's what it can look like when work and home and baby are all together in the same space. Obviously the boundaries are blurred too, and that can be tricky, when I want to have baby time and I'm need to talk about something that's work related. That can be tricky too, and we're still figuring out what that looks like.
Well, you and your partner, Ken, dear friend of mine, have an incredible partnership in that even before becoming parents and starting a company together, you also traveled together, which is like 24/7 time together. I mean, I see my husband maybe 2 to 3 hours a day, waking hours, just because we work apart from each other. So you traveled together for a year, you work together, and now you're co-parenting. And he just, like, that is very remarkable. I just want to say that it's remarkable what you two do and have done together and created together and grown together. Any just like tips from like a successful marriage, I just like a great partnership, any strategies that you could share that really work for you two?
Oh gosh. Thank you. I mean, we we have just gone with what felt right to us. And even while we were traveling, we had made this whole plan to do separate trips at some point during our travel year. And we kept talking about it, and, we'd say, okay, I'm going to go to Italy and I'm going to do the Italian class. And, Ken was going to go visit a friend, and then we'd, something would come up and we'd want to do another plan that was, us together traveling. And we finally realized that we didn't really want the time apart. Which, doesn't work for every partnership, of course. But for us, we kind of realized like that's what worked for us. We wanted to travel together. And that's not to say that, we didn't have days when we were off with different friends, or, we have some, though now it's fairly limited, alone time too. But we just decided that that's what worked for us and went with it. And it's been that way, kind of for this pandemic year too. And not that we could have planned it, but that travel year and working together every day really helped set us up for then starting out where we were together every day, and then living in this pandemic year where everyone was at home all the time. So it kind of just went, for us, it was really seamless. And we just went with what felt right. And we checked in about it, and we, made sure that we were both feeling good about it. And, and we still do that. And so far it's still feeling good.
I know that travel is a shared value of yours. I mean, you two met when you were studying abroad in Madrid. You lived abroad after graduating from college. I know you've taught abroad. And you took this gap year together. So I'm just curious, how will travel and multicultural education play into Evie's development, into your family plans? How do you think about like the next 20 years?
I don't think about the next 20 years, but maybe like the next 5. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But absolutely. I mean, travel and having a family that traveled has always been a big thing that we've talked about and planned for. And we definitely, want to go on the road with the baby at some point. Obviously, this year's been a little different than everyone expected. So she has yet to do any big trips, but she did drive to Tahoe and back, and that went pretty well. And so we're going on a road trip to Oregon this summer. So we're starting to plan more. Little trips will lead to bigger trips. We're hoping for a Europe adventure, sprinkling in those trips from early on and just figuring out what that looks like with a baby has always been a priority. And the other piece is, I think from home, you can do a lot with just exposure to cultures and languages. And I bought a bunch of books that, are just multicultural kind of exposure books that are, early things to read to her. And we have a lot of books in Spanish, and I want to start speaking more Spanish to her so she has that exposure. So I think it will be integrated into our lives, kind of throughout things.
I love it. There was one other question I'd meant to ask about making a marriage work in motherhood, which ties so nicely to your training, which is you work in early language development. I think what I keep hearing I need to figure out with my husband before and after baby is communication. And you mentioned how the SpeakEasy language app revolves around kind of like 4 big best practices / themes, which was face-to-face, exaggerate, pause and observe, and narrate. Do you have any like that, like best practices for communication with your partner?
I mean, now that I was trying to figure out how those 4 might, fit into some sort of marriage counseling, face to face. I mean, I think face to face communication is important for everyone, right? I don't know about exaggerating, but maybe just being clear, right? Like making sure that your message is clear, and if something's going on, to talk about it and make sure, we're understanding each other and we're saying the same thing. That comes up all the time in relationships. Pausing, definitely important. Listening, not just talking. And the narration one, I haven't quite figured out yet. Maybe that's just sharing a story from your day, or sharing something. I think we have something here. I feel like I could maybe work this into a parent coaching app in a different sense.
I love that you said that term, parent coaching. We talked at the beginning about traps that some parents can fall into with, for example, baby talk being an example. You do coach parents. Any other kind of just like trends that you see, like, parents tend to be worried about this, but I tell them this, just any kind of other parent coaching tips to share?
I think parent coaching is really like observing your baby. It's about kind of, observing the parenting style, and everyone's going to come into it with different baggage and different ideas about what's good and bad parenting, and what's, what they should be doing. And so, what we learn as therapists is to observe and give that time to the parent, and then, follow their lead in the same way that you're following the child's lead, so that it whatever advice you're giving integrates into their life in the best way. So I don't know if that's a specific observation or helpful point, but I think it's important to know that every parent has a different style, and there's not just one way that's right. And you're going to figure out what's right for you as a parent, and sort of absorb the advice and then take it or leave it. Right? There's so much out there. It's good to be easy on yourself too.
Yeah, that is what's overwhelming. I mean, I'm always wondering how much of motherhood can be prepared for versus you learn on the job. And of course, what I hear from you is also depends on your learning style. Like, you are a knowledge seeker, so seeking out more knowledge helped you. I remember my sister-in-law saying, I stopped looking at the internet because it was overwhelming and a terrifying place about all the things that could go wrong in my pregnancy. So it's like, figure out, self-awareness is so key here, right? Just know your own style.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might change, as it's your style as a parent and it's your child's style, which you maybe can influence a little bit, but you don't have full control over. So they're going to tell you what they want and need. And, whether they're a kid who wants to move around a lot, or, a more subdued personality, and, you'll have to adjust to that too. And so not everything's in our control.
And a related question. So we as parents, we as moms have a huge impact on our kids. At the same time, we don't control every variable. They are their own independent, blossoming, beautiful human. But how do we not take it personally if there are mistakes made? And again, with the baby, maybe you'll feel behind. Maybe they start a milestone too late. And but like later, of course, in life too, you're like, you want to blame yourself for everything. Like, oh, I'm a terrible mom. I think that's a phrase we hear too much. Like, I'm a terrible mom. How can we help people reframe this never-ending guilt that everything is their fault?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I think it's just repeating that idea to yourself that, there's so many different styles out there, and you don't have control over everything. And the best thing you can do is be present and engaged, and, go back to that following your child's lead. And, you can't control it all.
Who are the women that you lean on? I mean, as you know, I've been working on a community called YaYa to empower women. There's obviously a lot that the wonderful men in our lives can support us, but there's something to be said for female friendship, for female mentorship. Who are some of the moms that have helped guide or impact you?
Yeah, well, I mean, my own mom, of course, is, we have very similar personalities in a lot of ways, similar interests and parenting styles. Mm-hmm. And so she's a great source to talk to about child development. She's also she's an occupational therapist. She's in the same kind of field as I am. And so, she's great to talk to about development, and, of course, has been super encouraging along the way. And then, I have a really amazing community of mom friends here and virtually, and, kind of spread all over the world at this point. But it's been so great to connect with people through pregnancy and this kind of early time, and just share pictures and share stories. And I have a regular call with some friends who, right after Evie was born, I got on the call, and the first thing they said was, "We want to hear your birth story." And which was great. I mean, I think, as a side note, birth stories are great and should be told. And I hope that someone asks you to tell your birth story after your birth, because I wouldn't have volunteered it myself, but to hop on that call and have them say, like, "Hey, we're stopping right now. You're here. We want to listen to you talk for 20 minutes about, your experience," was so cool. So I'm just super lucky to have that community, both in person and virtually, of friends that I feel like I can talk to, and, have gone through it with their young kids as well. And so can be sources of advice and just sharing.
Well, I can't wait to tell you my birth story. I have been frustrated. I took a class on labor and delivery. It wasn't that great, but you see Hollywood, and it's like, or even just your friends on social media, you find out they got pregnant, and then 9 months later, there's a picture of a baby, and you don't actually hear, like, sometimes maybe you'll be like, oh, 19 hours of labor. I don't know what that means. Like people don't tell you about labor. Like, I feel like I'm just learning now, 3 weeks from labor, what it might actually look like, how long I will be in labor, likely until even going to the hospital. What am I going to do during that time? Am I supposed to, like, watch Netflix, go for a walk, take a bath? It's like kind of preparing all the options. But I'm really excited to be able to share my stories with you, to lean on you, to be texting you all the questions, which I've already been doing. Actually, just so the world knows, I think Kyla knew before my family, because I was going to see her, and I was like, "Am I allowed to see you if I'm pregnant? Am I allowed to do X, Y, and Z while pregnant?" Like, you were the first to know, outside my husband, of my pregnancy. I think the day after I read the pregnancy stick, I told you this. So thank you for being on this journey with me for over 8 months now, and for the next 40 years.
Absolutely.
You.
I'm honored to be that person for you. And I think, more moms should feel comfortable doing that, sharing questions and, and all of their worries and concerns. And what do I do during labor is a great question. If you need some distraction, you can call me.
No, I think I will.
I'm totally here for that. I did some online shopping in my early labor. Just,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, get ready for that FaceTime call. And thank you again for being my YaYa. If anyone wants to join YaYa, join YaYa.com, SpeakEasyCommunity.com. I can't wait to use your app every day to practice the activities with my own. And thank you so much for being here, Kyla.
Thanks, Jackie. It's been really fun.